Hiya, part 4 of the BFG. Chapter's called Snozcumbers. But if you don't eat people like all the others, Sophie said, then what do you live on? That is a squelching, tricky problem round here, the BFG answered. In this slosh-funkling giant country, happy eats, like pineapples and pigwinkles, is simply not growing. Nothing is growing except for one extremely icky-poo vegetable. It is called the snozcumber. The snozcumber? Cried Sophie. There's no such thing. The BFG looked at Sophie and smiled, showing about 20 of his square white teeth. Yesterday, he said, we was not believing in giants, was we? Today we's not believing in snozcumbers. Just because we happen not to have actually seen something with our own two little winkles, we think it is not existing. What about, for instance, the great squizzly Scotch hopper? I beg your pardon, Sophie said. And the humplecrimp. What's that? Said Sophie. And the rapscroskle? The what? Sophie said. And the crumpscoddle? Are they animals? Sophie asked. They is common animals, said the BFG contemptuously. I is not a very know-all giant myself, but it seems to me that you is an absolutely know-nothing human being. Your brain is full of rotten wool. You mean cotton wool, Sophie said. What I mean and what I say is two different things, the BFG announced rather grandly. I will now show you a snozcumber. The BFG flung open a massive cupboard and took out the weirdest looking thing Sophie had ever seen. It was about half as long, again, as an ordinary man, but it was much thicker. It was as thick around its girth as a perambulator. It was black with white stripes along its length, and it was covered all over with coarse knobbles. Here is the repulsant snozcumber, cried the BFG, waving it about. I scroggle it, I despise it, I desponge it. But because I was refusing to gobble up human beings like the other giants, I must spend my life guzzling up icky-poo snozcumbers instead. If I don't, I will be nothing but skin and groans. You mean skin and bones, said Sophie. I know it is bones, said BFG, but please understand that I cannot be helping it if sometimes I is saying things a little squiggly. I is trying my best all the time. The big friendly giant looked suddenly so forlorn that Sophie got quite upset. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't mean to be rude. There never was any schools to teach me talking in giant country, the BFG said sadly. But couldn't your mother have taught you? Sophie asked. My mother? Said the BFG. Giants don't have mothers. Surely you is knowing that. I did not know that, said Sophie. Who ever heard of a woman giant? Shouted the BFG, waving the snozcumber all around his head like a lasso. There never was a woman giant, and there never will be one. Giants is always men. Sophie felt herself getting a little muddled. In that case, she said, how were you born? Giants isn't born, the BFG answered. Giants appears and that's all there is to it. They simply appears, the same way as the sun and the stars. And when did you appear? Sophie asked. Now, how on earth could I be knowing a thing like that? Said the BFG. It was so long ago, I couldn't count. You mean you don't even know how old you are? No giant is knowing that, the BFG said. All I is knowing about myself is that I is very old, very, very old and crumply, perhaps as old as the earth. What happens when a giant dies? Sophie asked. Giants is never dying, the BFG answered. Sometimes, and quite suddenly, a giant is disappearing and nobody is ever knowing when he goes to. Mostly us giants is simply going on and on like whiffsy time twiddlers. The BFG was still holding the awesome Snozzcumber in his right hand, and now he put one end into his mouth and bit a huge hunk of it. He started crunching it up, and the noise he made was like crunching lumps of ice. "It's filthin'," he spluttered, speaking with his mouth full and spraying large pieces of Snozzcumber like bullets in Sophie's direction. Sophie hopped around on the tabletop, ducking out of the way. "It's disgusterous," the BFG gurgled. "It's sickable. It's rotsome. It's maggot-wise. Try it for yourself, this fowsome Snozzcumber." No thank you," Sophie said, backing away. "It's all you're going to be guzzling around here from now on, so you might as well get used to it," said the BFG. "Go on, you snipsy little winkle, have a go." Sophie took a small nibble. "Ugh," she spluttered. "Oh no. Oh gosh, oh help." She spat it out quickly. "Puh. It tastes of frog skins," she gasped, "and rotten fish." "Worse than that," said the BFG, roaring with laughter. "To me, it's tasting of cockroaches and slime wranglers." "Do we really have to eat it?" Sophie said. "You do, unless you is wanting to become so thin you will be disappearing into a thick ear." "Into thin air," Sophie said. "A thick ear is something quite different." Once again, that sad, winsome look came into the BFG's eyes. "Words," he said, "is oh such a twickling problem to me all my life. So you must simply try to be patient and stop scribbling. As I am telling you before, I know exactly what I am wanting to say, but somehow or another they is always getting squiddled around." "Well, that happens to everyone," said Sophie. "Not like it happens to me," the BFG said. "I is speaking the most terrible Wiglish." "I think you speak beautifully," said Sophie. "You do?" said the BFG, suddenly brightening. "You really do?" "Simply beautifully," Sophie repeated. "Well, that is the nicest present anybody has ever given me in my whole life," cried the BFG. "Are you sure you is not twiddling my leg?" "Of course not," Sophie said. "I just love the way you talk." "How wonder-crump," cried the BFG, still beaming. "How whoopsie splunkers, how absolutely squiffling. I's all of a stutter." "Listen," Sophie said. "We don't have to eat Snozzcumbers. In the fields round our village, there are all sorts of lovely vegetables like cauliflowers and carrots. Why don't you go and get some of those next time you go visiting?" The BFG raised his head proudly in the air. "I is a very honourable giant," he said. "I would rather be chewing up some rotsome Snozzcumbers than snitching from other people." "You stole me," said Sophie. "I did not steal you very much," said the BFG, smiling gently. "After all, you was only a tiny little girl." So that's it for now. Part 5 next time. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and please send me your poems, your stories, your art, and I'd love to show them. Link will be in the description. Alright, till next time, lots of love.